Hello everybody, Catchy1380 with Catchy Gaming, and I recently completed Mario vs. Donkey Kong on the Nintendo Switch. Mario vs. Donkey Kong is a remake of the Game Boy Advance title from 2004, which followed up with two other titles on the DS, Mario vs. Donkey Kong Mini Land Mayhem and Mario vs. Donkey Kong 2 March of the Minis. I never played the Game Boy Advance version or the DS title, so this is brand new to me, so that's a reason why I bought it, even though it's another remake from Nintendo. So right off the bat, it starts you with a cutscene with a simple premise. Donkey Kong here sees a Mario toy that he really wants, tries to go get one, sees that they're sold out, then goes directly to the Mario toy factory. I can see that Mario is doing well for himself just to get one of these, and he ends up taking all of them.
Hey! Hey! Wait!
It then turns into a cat and mouse game of Mario chasing Donkey Kong in order to retrieve his toys. Mario vs. Donkey Kong is a puzzle platforming game where you have to solve various puzzles while jumping on platforms or on top of enemies in order to find your way around the level in order to complete it. And the game is split into three different parts. You have worlds 1 through 8, each with 6 different levels, along with a segment where you gather all the minis that you've saved before in order to determine how many hits Mario can take during the battle that he has with Donkey Kong at the end of each world. Now, for the first 8 worlds, each level is split into 2 different parts. The first part, you gather a key and you go through a door. The second part, you save the mini and then you proceed on to the next level. Pretty straightforward and simple. But while you're in these levels, you gather 3 different presents between the 2 segments. You need to gather all 3 of these presents in order to earn a perfect rating, which comes into play later in the game. Now, in terms of mechanics for Mario himself, it's a bit of a callback to the arcade Donkey Kong game. It's supposed to be a direct sequel to it as well. As for the mechanics, Mario isn't as fast as he usually is in his previous outings. His pace is deliberately slow, and his ability to jump isn't as high or as well controlled in comparison to his 3D counterparts or even some of his 2D counterparts, especially recent ones like Mario Wonder. You have just enough reach and height to make it on top of enemies or make it across gaps. It definitely feels similar to the arcade where you had to go to the very edge of platforms in order to jump and make it across. Now, unlike the arcade, you could pick some objects up and toss them, like the garbage can, or the toys that are based off of the various Mario minions, mainly that of Shy Guys. And sometimes you don't actually pick them up to use them as weapons against other toys. They can be used as puzzle elements later down the road. Now, the first few levels are just a basic tutorial on what to do and how to play the game. You can see me messing around trying to figure out what my limitations with Mario are and aren't. Although Mario's basic jump is pretty short in comparison to his other jumps, they still use other mechanics from previous Mario games. For instance, the reverse sort of somersault jump. On top of that, they have a version of Mario's 3 jump mechanic that gives Mario a little bit of extra height on that third jump. And all these get utilized later on when you get to different levels throughout the game. They also bring back the mallet. There is one thing I didn't get any footage for, but you can actually toss the mallet up, go up to a different platform, and if you're quick enough, grab the hammer and use it on a totally different platform. It's kind of neat and allows you to pull off some sort of crazy mechanics later on in the game to destroy certain enemies that would usually harm Mario and cause you to lose a life. And speaking of lives, I never reached a max amount, but if you do lose all of them, you go to a game over screen and then you can continue where they give you 5 additional lives. I kind of found this a little pointless to have infinite lives or even a game over screen when all they do is just give you lives. I mean, at this point, why don't they just let you keep trying the level without having to say continue? If all they're going to do is just give you an infinite source of lives. There's no real stakes in the game in terms of running out of lives. You can just keep trying as many times as you want. Anyways, so after you rescue all 6 of the mini Marios, you then get to take them all through a various sort of maze-like course. And you use them to get some of the presents. Sometimes Mario has to grab them as well. And based on the number of mini Marios that you rescue, determines how many hits Mario can take in the next segment where you take on Donkey Kong. Each world has a boss fight with Donkey Kong. Most of the time, he has a series of 3 buttons which affect what objects you might be able to collect or throw at him. And there are a couple of other boss levels where he doesn't have any buttons whatsoever. But when it comes to the levels with said switches, he can kind of get on the obnoxious side just a little bit. I don't know if there is a pattern. There seems to be sort of when you first start the level, and then it quickly sort of dissipates into what feels like random button pushes at some point. And he can push them quite often and rather frequently. That's why it feels kind of obnoxious at times. As for a fight with Donkey Kong that I did find a little bit on the obnoxious side was this particular fight here. Notice there's no buttons, but you saw that barrel come after me. That particular barrel always traces Mario regardless of what path you choose. It's not a random pattern, it always goes after Mario. I didn't notice at first, but after taking a couple hits from the barrel, I finally realized that it didn't matter what direction I went and how much I dodged. This barrel was always going to hit Mario, unless I moved away from said barrel. So in order to defeat Donkey Kong, you have to hit him 4 times, and if you want a perfect rating, you have to take 0 hits. After that, you move on to a totally different world, with a different set of puzzles. Now, here's something that it's rather minor, but I notice quite often. Whenever a new world is introduced, you literally get the exact same scene, or more or less the exact same thing. You see Donkey Kong running, then Mario catches up, tells him exactly the same way, hold on, and then chases after him. The only thing that changes is the background and the terrain that he's running on. And that happens for each world. Like I said, it's just a minor thing. Anyways, after you beat Donkey Kong in the first 8 worlds, you then move on to a fight which is an homage to the original Donkey Kong taking place on a construction site. Mario has to free 3 toads, and they'll bring him a giant barrel that you use to toss at Donkey Kong. Now, this level isn't exactly too hard, especially if you get the timing down right in terms of him hitting the buttons at the initial part of the level. The one problem that does make it kind of slightly annoying is that the camera doesn't seem to pan up far enough for you to be able to dodge those barrels, so you kind of have to get lucky. Or you can stop and pause the game using the R button on the shoulder, which then allows you to pan a camera up and see what's above you, which I personally didn't like because it felt like it was stopping the flow of the game in order to keep myself from getting hit, and it just felt kind of out of place. So after you hit Donkey Kong with a 3rd barrel, he then falls from the building and into a van of mini Marios that has yet to be delivered. After Donkey Kong crashes through this van, the whole entire chase starts all over again with 8 new worlds and 6 new levels. The difference being you don't have to go through and rescue all the mini Marios at once and put them in a toy box. These worlds are called Plus Worlds. And this is where the game gets kind of on the frustrating side due to certain mechanics being used. And by that, I mean it's the mini Marios themselves. So, with these levels, you have to go around and you have to grab the mini Mario who has a key. You then have to guide the mini Mario to the door to unlock it. So, these mini Marios that follow you around are not the brightest. There's just a basic bare bones sort of AI. They will blindly follow Mario, but in some cases, it feels like they interpret some movement as a direction I don't want to go. For instance, I wish I had this recorded, but I had one particular mini who constantly would just jump into a spike trap when I was on a platform and I would turn around. It interpreted me as turning around to move forward, and he would constantly just jump into the spikes, regardless of what I did. And sometimes there's a bit of a lag in terms of them following you, causing them to get hit by whatever mechanic or enemy is in the game, causing you to lose a life and then having to restart the stage all over again. Which just sort of upped the ante more or less, because now you have to watch after yourself in the mini Mario to get through the level so that you don't run out of lives or have to start the stage all over again. Now, I think I said this, but I'll say it again. These mini Mario segments were probably the more frustrating part due to the mini Marios themselves. Although I would like more control over the minis, I kind of get why they did it. It's to add to the difficulty. Now, in terms of overall, let's call it difficulty for lack of a better word, of the game in general, it's not all that hard, to be honest. With most of the times I lost a life mainly due to me being kind of a spaz and not getting the distance on my jump correct. And either falling short on top of an enemy's head or falling into a pit of spikes. I did have a little bit of trouble with these lights, sort of laser things you see here, for whatever reason. I mean, I got through it, but other than that, the game's not that difficult. Even the last set of levels that they have, that they dubbed the expert levels, weren't exactly that difficult. Some of them were definitely challenging, and some of the biggest challenges in terms of the game, but I still got through them pretty easily. And if you just saw that little bit, I got the Mario Mini stuck somewhere, so I just had to kill him. I also wanted to capture footage for the game over screen where they just give you 5 lives. Like I pointed out earlier, I forgot that was here, and I'm just using it as B footage, but here you go. So getting back to the sort of the story, after you beat the World Plus levels, you then go against Donkey Kong and you go against him again, resulting in Mario giving Donkey Kong a toy. Sort of in a weird fashion, kind of feels like a bit of a retcon from the original Donkey Kong game, making Mario a much nicer guy in comparison to what he was there. At least that's what I sort of thought when I was a kid. But that's besides the point. It had a happy ending for everyone involved. So, one of the last things I want to cover before I get to the conclusion is I wanted to talk about the expert levels. It's the third part that I said they kind of split the game into. It has no bearing on the story whatsoever, but it's supposed to test a player more or less in terms of what the mechanics are and less in the puzzle element. There are some puzzle elements to it, but it's more about can you move Mario around fast enough with all the various jumps he can do in order to get to the end of the level. And if you want to earn a perfect rating, you still have to gather the same 3 presents, which adds a layer of difficulty to some of these levels. Some of them are easy. They're easier than some of the levels in my playthrough through the first 16 levels. Now, the last thing I want to touch on is the length of the game. I was actually kind of surprised by the length of it, but I knew it was going to be a short game. I just didn't know how short. I completed all the levels with a perfect rating, including the expert levels, in 10 hours. And I paid $50 for this game, and that's under my threshold for dollar to entertainment value. In terms of its visual quality, it's pretty nice. Its gameplay is entertaining enough, but its length is really short for $50 in my opinion. And I would say wait for it to be on sale, but Nintendo has a tendency not to put their games on sale. And even if this one does go on sale, it won't be much. I can't imagine them dropping more than maybe $30 for this title at best. And that's actually an extreme in this case. Overall, I thought the game was entertaining, yes, and I, for the most part, enjoyed myself and my time playing it. I just thought I paid a little too much for the title itself. especially a remake. Yes, they remade a whole entire Game Boy game, gave it brand new graphics and stuff like that, but the number of hours I got from it just wasn't quite what I would deem worthy of how much I paid for it, which is by far its biggest detraction, at least in my opinion, of the game. If you get a chance to play it, either borrow it or if it does so happen to go on sale cheap enough that you feel like it's worth playing, I would definitely go for it. Anyways, if you made it this far, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.